So 5 weeks is a pretty long time to be away. In the past, you've talked about the sort of desire to maybe live like a nomadic lifestyle, like in an RV, like that was an interest of yours. Like, has this reinforced your need for a home, or like, has it changed your mind in any way? Changed any preconceptions you had about that?
It's a good question. I don't know if I'd go so far as it changed our idea about having a home, but what it did do, and I know this is true because Lori and I had a really good discussion about it after we'd been away for, I think the first time we had it was we'd been away about 3 weeks, and then we had it again at the end of the trip. Both of us, I think particularly her, feel a lot more comfortable with the idea of longer trips. Like, it was easier than we thought it would be, right? It's nice to have an idea. It's another thing to practically experience it,
Yeah.
especially when you're leaving behind things you care about, right? I know you love pets so much, but we have some animals, and we have friends who, graciously took care of them for us. But after a couple weeks and we know they're getting taken care of well, I think she stopped thinking about them as much as she did before. And, we didn't feel like that pull to be back in, our bed or things like that. I think while this trip was a little unusual in just how many small moves we made to visit different people, like all the driving, than a typical vacation would be, I think that gave us even more confidence that a proper trip that we would normally take that wasn't broken up into so many little stages like this one was, would actually be pretty easy. So I would say, if nothing else, it reinforced the idea of us taking 4 to 6 week or maybe even longer vacations or short-term stays away from a home. I don't think Lori would say, and she's not here to answer this, but I suspect she wouldn't say, yeah, it gave me actually, and now I'm of the opinion that I don't need a home.
Right.
I don't think I would say that, but I would say she and we feel more comfortable with the idea of leaving home for weeks to months at a time, just because it felt good.
But
it
you
felt
said
like something we could do. So that was great to test that out.
I mean, you did say at the end of it, you were like looking forward to getting back, though.
Yeah, but that's also like we had a terminus and knew we were getting near it, and we did have so much movement around, and a lot of family time, and lots of things going on, and sometimes at the end of all that, it's like, oh, you want your routine back, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, I was feeling a pull to do my little 1 day a week job. So I think it was kind of more that than it was we were tired of being out and seeing new places. Some of it may have been just where we were, right? The end of our trip was in Florida, which is delightful, but not necessarily our number one choice for where we want to spend time in July, right? It's very hot. It's very humid. If we were somewhere else
Some people like
experiencing
that
it for the first time, that's why I'm not making fun of Florida. I'm just saying I don't want to be in hot and humid weather in July and trying to sleep at night. But if we were somewhere we'd never been before, we've been to Florida a bunch of times. If we were somewhere new, a foreign country, we might have been feeling like we're just getting started after, 3 or 4 weeks there. And so it might have been more, less of a pull to say, well, I'd kind of like to get home. I mean, how when you guys think about that, you and Laura think about these longer term stays or being nomadic, how do you envision that going?
I'm looking forward to longer travel. I still am a person who likes to have a home base, I think, to come back to. And it's we've talked about this trawler, this boat idea, for a long time. And, I first started having some misgivings about it, like this idea where Laura's like, well, we're going to be stuck on this thing like 3 feet from each other for potentially like a really long time. Like, ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I do like that ability. I mean, just like like having this studio, a place to kind of return to that kind of feels like my own. But I'm also looking forward to seeing what that's like, having 5 weeks to program and plan and just explore, and also equally nervous about like, okay, what's that going to cost?
Yeah.
So I was curious to hear, even you, who I think of as having a bigger phi number than me, like, okay, if he's concerned about it, what's that going to look like for me? So maybe I got to dial back my expectations a little bit and say, okay, maybe not every meal is not eating out. Maybe we can, that's maybe not where the enjoyment lies in this journey.
Yes.
Right. And so
that's the message.
Yeah.
That's the message.
I'm
Eric.
open to that.
And I think it was good when I found myself thinking about that, because look, I've spent the last year thinking about that more than ever in my adult life, right? Is this really a sensible thing to spend money on? Because is it delivering the value that we believe it should versus something else? I appreciate being better about that now. I like to think, especially in the year running up to leaving work, that was a part of the mental training that I think we were doing for ourselves, right? In budgeting. So it's not a foreign concept, but it's still, the stakes are different. But once you stop working.
Oh, totally. But if I think about dollar for dollar money spent on travel, like it's always going to be like a much higher value to me than like, buying lawn furniture or something like that. And you and I are definitely aligned on that, I know. And, whether I spend a little bit more on getting the bottle of wine that pairs with the tasting menu, maybe I'll do that every once in a while, because we haven't had a chance to do that living here. But
correct.
I probably wouldn't make that a part of my daily routine unless something changes drastically.
And for sure, right? I mean, for someone, who would be watching this, I think there's no need to judge anyone's decisions like that. It's just, you just have to prepare for what you find important, right? And if you find that important, or if you're somebody that believes, I want all of my travel to be business class travel, well, maybe you're only going to do one of those trips a year or every 2 years, whatever.
Or maybe it's just
how you value things.
Maybe your wife rides in coach.
Maybe your wife rides in coach.
Anything you would do differently? I mean, I know this was maybe a non-traditional trip for you, but for the next trip that you have planned, once you refill your budget line item there, your sinking fund.
I think particularly if you're taking a long trip, 4 to 6 week trip, it's really nice to kind of plant roots for a week at a time. Okay. Is kind of one of the thoughts we left with. And I think we typically did that anyway, but moving around so much as we did, particularly in the earlier stages of the trip, the first 2/3 of it, we felt, pretty steeled in the idea that, weekly is a pretty good pace to move if you need to move. 2 weeks is awesome, but a week is no problem at all. Shorter than that, driving or whether it's driving or trains or planes, just picking up and moving that often is kind of a lot.
Yeah.
So I would say doing it at a 1 to 2 week interval felt really good for us. So that's definitely a take home that, you have to experience to realize that's the way to go. I think other lessons are, it felt really good to have the slower pace and have lists of things you could consider doing, but didn't feel compelled to do. And just having the freedom to divide up your time based on how you felt that day is so freeing versus having to create a schedule in advance and feel kind of compelled to stick to it, because otherwise it's not going to work out. That's just such a huge difference that we found really attractive, and I'm sure will only continue.